con delega e gemellaggi. Nel caso specifico sono la responsabile per il progetto europeo che stiamo per avviare e sarò per tutto il periodo la vostra referente. E come sapete, i comuni di San Pietro al Natisone come capofila del progetto e di Sambreville come comune gemellato hanno aderito al progetto europeo Cittadini per l'Europa, cofinanziato dall'Unione Europea. Il tema principale del progetto è la celebrazione del 70° anniversario della Schuman Declaration, 9 maggio 1950, e la sua attualizzazione nel contesto di un processo di maggiore integrazione. Il programma si svilupperà nell'arco di 21 giorni, a partire dal 20 del 4 al 9 maggio e prevede il coinvolgimento di più di 100 studenti, di cui 55 provenienti da Sambreville, più insegnanti e autorità. Le attività progettuali da sviluppare si svolgeranno in parte online e in parte in presenza, con 5 webinar coordinate da esperti che sono stati scelti insieme ad ISIC, Istituto di Sociologia Internazionale, per i 5 assi di temi prioritari del progetto: economia, sicurezza e confini, fiducia nelle istituzioni, ambiente e educazione, raccolta nel white paper. Gemellaggio in presenza a San Pietro al Natisone nelle giornate 7, 8, 9 con workshop sulle tematiche precedentemente discusse nei webinar. Evento finale con creazione da parte degli studenti del manifesto sul futuro dell'Europa. Ogni comune del progetto, rappresentato da una delegazione di studenti partecipanti, porterà le proprie istanze e riflessioni sulle tematiche in oggetto davanti alle autorità locali dei suddetti comuni. I webinar verranno registrati e pubblicati successivamente sul canale YouTube dedicato del Comune e potranno essere ascoltate dalle persone direttamente coinvolte nel progetto. Dal giorno 7 maggio al giorno 9 maggio tutti gli studenti belgi e locali, più di 100 studenti, saranno impegnati nelle sedi appositamente scelte presso il nostro comune, in delle workshop interattive per discutere insieme ai relatori di ISIC degli argomenti precedentemente trattati durante le webinar. L'ultimo giorno del progetto verrà filmato dalle autorità istituzionali presenti un manifesto for the future preparato dagli studenti partecipanti al programma e che riassumerà a brevi punti il lavoro svolto e gli obiettivi raggiunti dal progetto. Tutte le attività del progetto saranno disseminate sui social, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube e su pagina dei 2 comuni coinvolti. Nel rispetto della privacy chiediamo a tutti i ragazzi di tenere le videocamere oscurate ed il microfono spento, attivandolo solo in caso di richieste di interventi. Bonjour à tous et merci d'être présents aujourd'hui. Je me présente, je suis Cathy Grisetti, conseillère de la municipalité de San Pietro al Natisone, en charge pour le jumelage. Dans ce cas précis, je suis la personne en charge du projet européen que nous sommes sur le point de démarrer et je serai votre interlocuteur pendant toute la période. Comme vous le savez, les communes de San Pietro al Natisone en tant que chef de projet et de Sambreville en tant que commune jumelée vont collaborer pour le développement du projet européen Citoyens pour l'Europe, cofinancé par l'Union européenne. Le thème principal du projet est la célébration du 70e anniversaire de la déclaration Schuman, 9 mai 1950, et son actualisation dans le cadre d'un processus de plus grande intégration. Le programme se déroulera sur 21 jours du 20-04 au 9-05 et implique l'implication de plus de 100 élèves, dont 55 de Sambreville, plus enseignants et autorités. Les activités du projet à développer se dérouleront en partie en ligne et en partie en personne, comme suit. 5 webinaires coordonnés par des experts qui ont été choisis avec l'aide de ISIC, Institut de Sociologie Internationale, pour les 5 axes prioritaires du projet: économie, sécurité, frontières, confiance dans les institutions, environnement, éducation. Extrait du livre blanc sur l'avenir de l'Europe. Jumelage en présence à San Pietro al Natisone les jours 7, 8, 9 avec des ateliers sur le sujet précédemment abordé dans les webinaires. Événement final avec la création par les étudiants du manifeste sur l'avenir de l'Europe. Chaque commune du projet, représentée par une délégation d'étudiants participants, apportera ses propres demandes, réflexions sur les enjeux en question devant les autorités locales des communes précitées. Les webinaires seront enregistrés et publiés ultérieurement sur la chaîne YouTube dédiée de la municipalité pour être écoutés par les personnes indirectement impliquées dans le projet. Du 07 au 9-5, tous les étudiants belges et locaux, plus de 100 étudiants, seront engagés dans les lieux spécialement choisis de notre commune, dans les ateliers interactifs pour discuter avec les intervenants de l'ISIC des sujets précédemment abordés lors des webinaires. Le dernier jour du projet verra la présentation d'un manifeste qui sera signé par les autorités institutionnelles et précédemment préparé par les étudiants participants au programme et qui résumera en bref point le travail effectué et les objectifs atteints par le projet. Toutes les activités du projet seront diffusées sur le réseau social sociaux, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube et sur la page des 2 communes concernées. Dans le respect de la privacy, nous demandons à tous les étudiants de garder les télécaméras sombres et le microphone éteint, en ne l'activant que dans le cas de demande d'intervention. Je vous souhaite une très bonne écoute et je vous laisse dans les mains de notre expert qui suivra le webinaire en langue anglaise. Grazie a tutti e lasciamo la parola al nostro esperto, il dottor Lorenzo.
Okay.
Grazie a tutti.
Thank you, Kathy, for the introduction. I hope you hear me well. And good morning to everybody. Buongiorno a tutte e tutti. Bonjour à tout le monde. And first of all, let me thank the both municipalities of San Pietro al Natisone and of Sambreville for involving me in this interesting activity. And while I start sharing my screen, let me firstly briefly introduce myself. So I'm very glad to be with you this morning. Thanks again to both the municipalities for involving me and for this. Let me also congrats for the great organization of this event. I think it's important to organize always event like this and to involve the youth generations. And also thanks to the ISIG, International Institute of Sociology based in Gorizia, for involving me in this activity and in this lecture, about one of the pillars that represent the political, but not only, activities of the European Union. My name is Lorenzo Davidovich. I am a researcher. I work at the University of Trieste, where I am right now. I'm currently at my office at the university, and I work in the field of social sciences, largely intended. And today I'm very glad to talk about how our planet is changing, how European Union is dealing with the changes of the environment. And we will start from we will move from the white paper on the future of Europe. So we will stay together for the next hour and a half, more or less, with this to have together this journey through the environmental changes and through the actions that the European Union is put in action, is organizing and is carrying out to tackle, to deal with environmental changes. Therefore, I hope that first of all, I hope I won't bore you. Usually I'm used to teach to students that are a little few years older than you, but I did my best to prepare a very comprehensive and understandable lecture. So I really hope that you will enjoy and that you will have the passions to follow me in this journey that is organized into 4 steps, as you can notice. So we will use the white paper on the future of Europe that was designed in 2017 as a starting point. It will be the kickoff of our journey of this morning. Then we will focus on some keywords, of some important words that characterize the study of the environmental changes and the focus on the environment broadly intended. And then we will move to we will devote attention to European Union, to how Europe and the member states of European Union are organizing themselves to tackle the environmental changes and all the related aspects to that. And then I will provide an example about these possible solutions that are currently organized, but have been already organized in the past years to deal with the environmental changes, and especially in the field of energy production and energy consumption. But in general, we will also see the importance of community building, of creating community when we face environmental changes and when we work with the improvement and with the importance of pay attention to our environment and to preserve, to protect our environment after many decades of consumption that have been developed in much different ways. I will also do my best to make my English highly understandable, so I will talk quite slowly. I will do my best to make it clear every step that I will develop. To all of you guys, so all the students, but also the other people that is connected at this moment, feel free to stop me whenever something is not clear to you. When you need some clarification, just stop me, just say, sorry, Lorenzo, it's not clear this passage. Could you explain a little bit better what you are telling to us? And I will be pleased, I will be glad to respond to your request. If not, you can save the questions for the Q&A moment at the end of this presentation. So take a seat and let's start with me this journey from our kickoff, the white paper on the future of Europe. It starts with a key question, actually, a demand in one way. What future do we want for ourselves, for our European society, and especially for the youth generation? What future do we want for our children, and in general for the people that live in our union? This is an important sentence, an important question, because it describes, it illustrates the importance that the trajectories dedicated to further vision to the future are developing, are characterizing the political actions and the collective actions that European Union take into account and develop for the sustainability of environment, but not only. Consider also the other topics that have been addressed in the past days about the security, about the institution and the trust by citizens towards the institutions, and also the importance of education, of the economic system on the European Union. Therefore, this question actually have itself some key aspects that are dedicated, that strongly focuses on the further vision, on how we can imagine a better future after being aware as a society that some problems, let's say, have been occurred. Some problems are taking place in our society, and for instance, COVID-19 pandemic well exemplify a kind of problems that we faced with over the past 2 years, and we will see also in the next slides how this pandemic affected these problematics and how it also let's say it insisted on the importance of having visions about the future. So in this presentation, I will try to provide some answers, let's say, to this question, talking about environment and the solution to deal with the environmental changes. I suppose that most of you already heard about environmental changes, even with some other words that will be presented in the keywords part, but let's make it slow and let's do it step by step. Because to talk about the future, we need to look at the past. We need to make a step back to the roots of what is European Union, how we ended up into a European Union. Because if we go back to the first treaty, like the Treaty of Paris of 1951, which promulgated the European Coal and Steel Community, and also the Treaty of Rome, which promulgated the economic community on a European scale, and a community dedicated to nuclear energy. And also, if we take into account the Maastricht Treaty, which defined the European Union as a community, the European Commission and European Community as an economic and political entity and community, we will know that something has changed. Things are no more as they were in those years. So from 1950, so the post-war period, the years after the Second World War, and also until the early 90s. Compared to those years, the today's reality is very different. It's quite different. It has changed also if we consider an important event that occurred in the past year and was promulgated and defined once for all in 2020. I refer to Brexit, for instance. So if we look at this timeline, we do know, we are aware about the fact that reality is different from the moment, the era when the European community and the European Union were created as a community and as a political entity also, and economic, of course. So Brexit is an example, but many other aspects have been changed, and these aspects are related to the European society. So we will dedicate a little bit of attention as a matter of introduction to these societal changes in the European Union. First of all, if you look at this graph that is took from the white paper of the future of Europe, you can notice that today Europe, that these images shows that today Europe is an aged continent. In Europe, many old adults live, much more than in other continents, such as Asia or Africa, or even Latin America and North America, so the both Americas. And this difference is quite visible if we compare that to the past. At the beginning of the past centuries, of the 20th century, so in the early 19th, Europe accounted for around 25% of the whole world population. In 2015, so less than 10 years ago, this percentage dropped, highly decreased. You can notice this was around 6%, so a great difference. 25% at the beginning of the past century, 6% of the whole world population in the second decade of 21st century, of the current century. And some forecasts argue, they state that this percentage is foreseen to decrease more and more. And by 2060, so in the next future, so you can already notice the importance of looking at the future. Having forecasts is important to let's say, develop strategies that can be able to cope with these forecasts and developing viable solutions for a sustainable world in the face of these forecasts. These forecasts argue that by 2060s, Europe's population will only account for less than 5%. It should be 4%. So Europe as an aged continent, this is quite important as a societal aspect. One more data is that takes into account the median age, okay? The average age amongst the European member state. Which number do you notice? 45 years old is the median age for Europe, and you can notice that it's much higher compared to Africa, for instance, 21 years old. And for instance, you could take into account, just as a matter of example, that Lagos, which is the capital city of Nigeria, so an African state located in the sub-Saharan Africa, so the central part of Africa, is growing in terms of demographic increase, in terms of population growth, is growing faster than Italy and the large majority of the whole Mediterranean countries. I suppose that this comparison is also viable, is also valid if we compare Lagos and Nigeria population growth, demographic increase, compared also to other European countries. But I'm 100% sure that in this comparison, like this is growing more and faster than all Mediterranean countries. So this example gives you about the idea about the differences and about how, to what extent Europe is one of the oldest continents at the moment in the world, and this trend will continue, will continue to increase over the next, according to the forecasts, over the next years, the following years. Not only demographic changes, but also changes in the sphere of economic, so social economic changes. Let's take into account the GDP. I hope you know what GDP is. Is basically a data that accounts for the economic productivity of a country, or related to the European Union of a sum of specific countries. In this case, the member states of European Union, the EU 28 before Brexit, and now EU 27 as an acronym, EU 27 post-Brexit. Well, this data that accounts for the economic productivity is also decreasing in the EU 27. In 2004, so at the beginning of 21st century, it was accounting for the GDP growth was about 26%, okay? In 2015, it was decreased to 22%. So today, the European economic power began to wane, began to diminish. And again, with the forecast that look at 2030, we will see in the next slides that 2040 is, let's say, a threshold for specific actions, political and societal actions. In this forecast, it will account for less than 20% of the world GDP, in the whole world GDP. So if it was 26% in 2004 and 22% of the whole world GDP in 2015, it should be less than 20% by the 2030. This decreasing trend is actually common to other continents, other countries of Western world. It also involves United States of America. It also involves Japan, and as you can notice, and to a lower percentage, it also involves UK. Trend is different for other countries such as China, such as India, and to a shorter extent also to the Brazil. But in general, this is to say that the economic power of Europe that was pivotal and important in the post-war period, so in the period where the economic, the European, community was created with the different treaties that we see. So from the Paris Treaty, Treaty of Rome, then Schengen. So at that time, Europe's economy was central, was highly important for the whole planet, was one of the highest, was contributing to the world's GDP in a good way, let's say in a very visible and important way. Today is not more like this. This centrality began to diminish. One more aspect about the economic sphere, or rather about the job and the labor market, is related to unemployment, the lack of job, the absence of job, the difficulties experienced by the people to access to the labor markets. Unemployment, you can notice for these two charts, this is total amount This is another amount. In the European Union, unemployment levels began to fall from, let's say, the years that are after the economic recession. The economic recession started in the between 2007 and 2009. Then unemployment levels back to increase, and then began to falling. But as you can notice from these centers, they are falling, but they are still high. So there is a sort of fluctuations of unemployment level. It's not a standard line, but it's like a line made by many curves. And today European Union still face high unemployment levels. And this is very visible if we take into account a problematic reality of today's European Union, that the generation of today's young adults, so people like me, people that is just concluded university studies, that it is ready to enter in the labor market or is working in the labor market after the graduation, is a generation that ends up less well off than their parents. What does it mean? That on a general scale is a generation of young adults that is earning less than their parents. They have lower salaries than their parents. So if unemployment was decreasing until the economic recession, then began to increase again, and then began again to falling down, this is an encouraging trend, especially referred to what this graph show. But unemployment is still a problem. And you will notice that actually this chart stopped to 2017. What is missing in this graph? The years of COVID-19 pandemic. We will notice in the next steps of the presentation that COVID-19 pandemic have great negative effect. The consequences of COVID-19 pandemics are quite negative, have been quite negative on the international labor market and in European Union too, of course. So we should imagine that this trend for the years 2020 is supposed to increase again. So in this fluctuation, falling down and increasing again after 2020. So unemployment rate is a problem that still affects the European Union. European Union still copes with high unemployment level, but these unemployment levels are also characterized by high geographical inequalities, differences on a geographical scale. Look at this image, guys. The more red are the areas are the regions across the European Union countries, including Turkey too in this case. The more red are the regions, the higher is the unemployment rate. The less red is the color of the region, the lower is the unemployment rate. For the year 2020, so the year when the COVID-19 pandemic began to spread and affected our daily lives, what do you notice, guys? That the most red regions are located in the southern part of Europe, in the southern region of Europe. You will maybe know that at least the Italian students, the Italian people that is connected in this moment, they may be already studied in the history and geography that there is a difference in terms of, let's say, industrial activities and productivity between northern Italy and southern Italy. This is something that unluckily is persistent since the second post-war. Okay, this differentiation is highly visible if we consider the unemployment rate. So it's also involving southern regions of Spain and especially Greece. For instance, Greece, you guys I suppose you were quite young when Greece ran into an unprecedented economic recession, an economic crisis. It was 2009, 2010. So as a consequence of the economic crisis, the global economic, and as a consequence, fiscal crisis of the economic systems, many European countries run into economic crisis and crisis of their productivity in general sense. In Greece, this was much more higher. This problematic situation was much higher than in other European countries. So unemployment rate as a consequence began to highly increase. So we notice this was a great example about the differentiation among the European countries in terms of labor market and unemployment rate. We rather notice that, for instance, for Belgium, for the neighboring country of Belgium, I refer to the Netherlands, and for the Germany, for instance, for Scandinavian countries, unemployment rates are lower, much lower than in the countries of the Southern Europe. Therefore, what Europe is today? Aged continent, so continent characterized by a large presence of old adults, continents that as is having a diminished power in the global economy, and a continent that still faces with high unemployment rate. Take into account that in other countries, in other continents, of course, in Africa, for instance, unemployment rate, of course, is a much higher problematic. But this is not, of course, a ranking. This is not a race. This is not a chart, a classification between different continents. But of course, it was important as a matter of introduction to take into account, to take account for, and to illustrate rapidly these aspects, these socioeconomic aspects about our continent. So we do know now that there are some socioeconomic changes, but not only, guys. And you know better than me, actually, that there are not only socioeconomic changes in our contemporary society. I talked about environmental changes at the beginning of this presentation, just because I didn't want to anticipate an important keyword of this presentation, an important keyword that comes in our mind where we talk about the environment. What is this keyword? Climate change. So today we talk about the combination between socioeconomic change and the climate change. Introducing climate change enabled me to make a further step towards the second chapter of this journey that we are doing together into the study of the environment. So we right now moved from one of the key pillars, or rather from the question that is the kickoff of the white paper on the future of Europe. We addressed the key pillars that is important for the white paper on the future of Europe by looking at some data. some information that are reported in the white paper related to European society. And after this kickoff, through the important word of the climate change, we can now move to the keywords. So, welcome to this second chapter. But what is climate change? Let's define it together. So let's read together what is reported in this box. A climate change is a change of climate patterns, so of the features of the world's climates, which is attributed directly or indirectly to the human activity. So is a change of climate patterns that states, that say that the human activity highly contributes in direct forms or indirect forms to the change of climate patterns. And this human activity alters, changes, modifies the composition of the global atmosphere worldwide. I hope this is enough clear. So climate change as a change of climate patterns that gives a pivotal role to the direct or indirect activities made by us, made by humans, being aware that these human activities alters the composition of the atmosphere, of the air that we breathe every day. So it's something that affects our health, also our daily lives, and indeed the air that we breathe. Second keyword, because the keyword of the climate change now, let's make a pinpoint about that. Let's put there about an important word, that about the first keyword, that of climate change. And this is something that will accompany us in the next slide. So climate change, first keyword. Let's suddenly look at the second keyword. Anthropocene. I don't know if this is something new for you, or if this is something that you already heard about. Anthropocene is a combination of two words that derives from the ancient Greek language. Anthropo, which means human, and kainos, which means recent. Human and recent, combination of this word. To say what? To talk about what? To talk about the proposal of a geological epoch dating from the commencement, so from the starting of significant human impact on Earth geology and ecosystems. Let's shed light on this. When we talk about Anthropocene, is the effort of many scholars, geologists, geographers, and natural scientists that observed that the contemporary era is characterized by a significant human impact on the geology and the ecosystems of our planet. What does it mean according to the statements of these scholars and this proposal of this geological era? It's a proposal because, of course, it's some very different from the historical epochs and era that you studied, like in the history of when you study history, okay? Pleistocene, Neolithic, and all the old era where human is appeared on the planet. Okay, this is actually a proposal, so something that is based on studies, of course, but it's not already inserted in the very, let's say, study of the contemporary era. But this proposal of this geographical epoch says that human activities today significantly alters and modifies the geology of Earth and the ecosystem. So it's something that we could put next to the aspect, next to the definition of climate change. But let's make an example of how Anthropocene is theorized. There is, I hope you see this, there is this documentary which is called Anthropocene, the Human Epoch. This documentary, through the power of images, shows how this human activity alters and significantly modifies Earth geology. For instance, think about marble. What do you see here? You see a mountain and you see like something that's bear us, that remind us what? A modification of this mountain. This modification is for extracting marble from the mountains. Well, the extraction of marble was and is important for buildings, for the construction, for constructing and building the cities that we inhabit. But according to the Anthropocene features, the continuous extraction of marble alters in a tangible ways and once for all the feature of this mountain. And this continuous extraction of marble continued not only for building purposes, but then for other purposes that go beyond the very important need of constructing. Purposes that are related to luxury, that are related to souvenirs or products that are not highly necessary for our daily lives. Let's make an example in this respect. Think about Italy. In central Italy, for instance, there is a mountainous part, which is called Alpi Apuane, Apuane Alps. We are in the northern parts of Tuscany region, okay? I don't know if you visited Florence, so we are in the region of Florence. So between northern and central Italy. In these parts, many people, let's say art craftsmen, over the decades discovered that the marble that could be extracted from these mountains was one of the most prestigious marbles in the entire world. And they transformed this marble not only as a mean for constructing buildings, but as a mean for constructing luxury mansions, luxury villas, and aspects strictly related to luxury and strictly related to the luxury market. This is an example of how Anthropocene alters and continues to modify and to transform. Anthropocene accounts for a continuous transformation and mutation, modification of mountains, okay? There are many other aspects, the continuous extraction of for oil, for fossil fuels. So we are already talking about something related to environment. So Anthropocene describes the continuous and never-ending and incessant human actions on the features of our planet, on the ecosystems of our planets. Extraction on the mountain, extraction for the soil, for oil and for the natural gas, and so on. There are also other examples that would be related to the commercial activities, and so on. For instance, another example is already again in the luxury sphere is a market, the commercial trade of the I don't know how they're called in English, but zanne are in Italian, those of the elephants. You know that the elephants have these two cones that characterize the elephant. Okay, once elephants die, these to extract ivory, these okay, parts of the elephant was put into a market. So this is also to account for a continuous alteration of features of human land and of human actions on the land, and even on the let's say in front of animals also. So Anthropocene to account for the significant role of human activity in changing ecosystems and worlds and Earth's geology. Third keyword, sustainability. I imagine that you already heard about sustainability, maybe on the TV, maybe in other activities, maybe in school. But let's say together what sustainability is. According to an event, an event that was organized in 1983 among international political actors, political entities, to talk about sustainability. This event, or rather this meeting, was called Brundtland Commission. Brundtland Commission is said by many scholars that was the commission that for the first time provided a specific and concrete definition of the notion of sustainability. Sustainability, let's read it together, means meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generation, so of the generation of the future, to meet their own needs. So, meeting and satisfying the needs of the present, of the contemporary society, without compromising, without making more difficult the meeting and the achievement of the needs of the future generations. So something that is very, very coherent with the key question that characterizes the white paper for the future on the future of Europe and the pillars that define the white paper on the future on Europe. A vision towards the future. Sustainability is having political and non-political, so political, economic, socio-economic, collective action in the sphere of dedicated to the satisfaction of the basic needs of our society, looking at the present, but also looking at the future. Hope it is enough clear. Of course, it entails faster explanation rather than the concept of Anthropocene, I could imagine. Sustainability has been taken into account over the past years and recently with the definition of another notion, that of sustainable development. Sustainable development is the trajectory through which sustainability can be achieved, can be obtained, let's say. And UN, United Nations, defined through international discussion 17 objectives, 17 aspects, 17 features which have been defined as sustainable development goals. Okay? The 17 sustainable development goals have been defined when this international politicians and organizations defined a specific, let's say, an important document, like we could say document, but we could even define that as strategy, which is called Agenda 2030. Before I say that 2030, when I was talking about unemployment and the forecasts that state that unemployment is supposed to increase and let's say the increase of all the older adults in Europe should increase, I talked about the threshold of 2030 with reference to these forecasts. 2030 is a threshold because also it has been defined by the UN, by the United Nations, as the arrival for specific strategies related to sustainability and sustainable development. So these 17 sustainable development goals are those that define and characterize the Agenda 2030. We will dedicate a specific peculiar attention to all these 17 goals. So be ready for that in the next steps. But before addressing these, before dedicating attention to these 17 goals, let's introduce the fourth keywords of our today's analysis. Energy transition. So you could notice that we are developing keywords that are strictly close to the environment. What does it mean actually, environment? The place where we live, the natural and also non-natural aspects of the planet that we live. But we talk about environment related to, especially today related to climate change, environment and the alteration of environment are defined and framed within the proposal of the geographical epoch of Anthropocene. The important to preserve our environment and to protect our environment has been defined through the issue of, through the 17 Sustainable Development Goal, but also to make our environment more sustainable, which means looking at our needs, our present needs, by also looking at the future needs, at the future of the next generations. We also need a transition in the energy system, an energy transition. I also imagine that you already talked about, you already heard, about energy transition. But what does it mean, energy transition? Energy transition can be defined as a structural change in the energy system. Okay? This structural change entails the switch from non-renewable energy sources to renewable energy or other types of sustainable energy. What are the non-renewable energy sources? It's coal, fossil fuels, it's nuclear energy, and to a lower extent, even the gas, of course. There is also a debate about natural gas, but let's focus especially on coal, so fossil fuels, and also on the energy that is generated from nuclear power, okay? So these are the energies, the energy powers that were important when the European community was going to be created in the past. ACSC, European Community on Steel and Coal, so carbone, acciaio in Italian, steel and coal, was the first initiative towards the road, in the road toward the creation of a European community with the Treaty of Paris. With the Treaty of Rome, then there was also 1975, 1957, I apologize. There was also, next to the first creation of an economic community, there was the Euratom, so an European organization dedicated to nuclear power. In energy transition, after many studies that dedicated attention to non-renewable sources, in the energy transition, there is a switch from coal, steel, from coal and nuclear power to other sorts, other typologies of energy, and is the energy called renewable. Renewable energy is the typology of energy that derives from natural resources, from features that are present in our air, in our planet, in our nature, basically. So I refer to sun, I refer to wind, I refer to water. We will see better how renewable energy is important, and we will further see the differences between non-renewable and renewable energy. So we will be back on this aspect. In this moment, it's better to understand what energy transition is. So we know that is a switch from non-renewable to renewable, okay? And this switch entails studies, entails investments, entails many aspects, and also entails a change in mind, a change of perspective, a change of our daily behavior daily behavior in front of energy consumption. So basically it entails a daily behavior in a simple gesture like this, okay? We usually grew up, at least in my generation, and I suppose also the generation of all the teachers that are listening to me at this moment, we are used to looking at this gesture, so switching on and switching off our lamp and the lighting system, as something that is made in a passive way, okay? Switch on, switch off, nothing more, nothing less. And this not only entails lighting system, it also entails heat system, so to make our home, our houses, our domestic spaces warmer during the winter or colder during the summer time. The shift towards the use, the production, and the consumption, so the use of renewable energy, entails a change of perspective with these activities, with these behaviors, with these activities that we make every day, of course, and we will see in which sense it entails a change of behaviors. This change of behaviors, simply said, entails a passage from passive to an active activity. Again, we will see in the next steps what does it mean. Second aspect related to energy transition is an aim, an objective. And this aim is that of reducing the global reliance, so relying on the global reliance on fossil fuels. So those sorts of energy power generated from coal and from fossils. So those that entails an important alteration of natural system and an important, let's say, an important role of the human activity. So again, bearing in mind Anthropocene time, and something that so can't be seen as sustainable because this alteration of natural system and this pivotal role of human activity, of course, don't match so well with the issue of sustainability. So the aim is the reducing the global reliance on fossil fuels and reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. But what does it mean, greenhouse gas emissions? This is an important sub-keyword, or rather, is an important notion to understand in a better way the energy transition. Greenhouse gas emissions, such as carbon dioxide, CO2, are those emissions can be defined as those emissions into the Earth's atmosphere, so into the air that we breathe, into the atmosphere that characterize our lives, of any gas that is generated from the human activity. So gas that is generated from industries, from cars, from the heating system of our houses, and not only, of course. So everything that's put in the Earth atmosphere, gases that are generated from human activity. These gases change the Earth atmosphere, or in a simple sense, they contribute to the climate change. They contribute to the global alteration of Earth's atmosphere and also of the Earth's temperature, which is increasing year by year. I hope so this is enough clear for you. I hope also that the four keywords have been well described by me. And last but not least, I hope I'm not boring you too much. I promised you before talking about energy transition that many aspects, a specific aspect would have been dedicated to the 17 sustainable development goals. So let's discover together what are the sustainable development goals. And in doing this, we move to the third chapter of our today's journey into the ways in which we could deal with the environmental changes. So we know there is a combination of socioeconomic changes together with the climate changes, and we discovered this combination with the kickoff on the changes of the European society and with the keywords that are important to study the environment. Now, with the focus on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals designed by the United Nations, we could also look at how the European Union, which of course have studying exchanges with the UN, we will see how the European Union is dealing with, what they are doing to deal with the environmental changes. So, in this journey, we could start from the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So, first of all, European Union is working within the Agenda 2030 to achieve these 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So, are you ready? I hope so. Number 1. So, just an introduction. Some of them are strictly connected and related to the issue of environment. Some other are less related, but of course they are broadly related to the combination between socioeconomic transformations and climate transformation, environmental transformation, and the issue of sustainability, of course. SDGs, this is the acronym for the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG. Number 1, SDG number 1, no poverty, end of poverty in all its form everywhere. If you remember at the beginning of this of this presentation, I introduced how COVID-19 changed our society, changed our economic system in a negative way, and also how it affected the unemployment and the problems on the labor markets. Okay? Well, okay, this is visible if we talk about poverty. After COVID-19, in the entire world, an additional 199 to 124 million people were pushed back into extreme poverty for the year 2020. So for the year when the COVID-19 pandemic highly affected our nations, okay? You will remember there were lockdowns and of many productive activity. You remember those images of empty streets, no traffic by the streets, by the highways, and everywhere. Everybody, all of us, were at home with the inability to work. Just very few activities were still in activity, by the way. Some others not. And many spheres of the labor markets found highly difficulties to restart, highly difficulty to continue to work according to the restrictions needed to contrast the diffusion of COVID-19 and of the new coronavirus. Okay? Think about music, theater, think about many forms of art, but also many other aspects. Think about tourism, think about activities in the cafes and restaurants, okay? So in general, forecasts and studies by the UN stated that after COVID-19, hundreds million people were pushed back, went back in a condition of extreme poverty. Take into account that in other continents, more than in the European Union, let's say, such as Africa, such as Asia, such as Latin America, of course, extreme poverty was already a key problem. And inequality, so reach the differentiation also between very rich or very rich people and poor, very poor people, is still a key problem of our current society. Although general poverty has decreased on a general sense after the World War II and even after the economic boom, economic growth of the 1960s, of the post-war period, even though the general poverty has decreased, the difference is the inequality between rich and poor, between people that is extreme rich and people that is extreme poor, it's very wide, it's very large. So no poverty is the SDG number one, even to reduce, we will see, the poverty and to reduce this sort of inequality. But not only, we will see that inequality is also, we will see that inequality is also another SDG. So no poverty as a first SDG, also in light of the negative impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the labor market. SDG number 2, zero hunger, end of famine, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. So connecting the issue of sustainability to the issues of food supply, to the ways in which we eat and we nourish ourselves, having a more sustainable nutrition, a more sustainable agricultural systems, diminishing the intensive farms, diminishing the use of pesticides, diminishing the use of additives features in the cultivations of primary goods, such as grain, such as wheat, okay? Another example to account for this SDG number 2 of zero hunger, another number. Between 720 and 811 million people were undernourished in the whole world in 2020. So this is an important SDG. End of hunger, achieving food security, and more sustainable ways of nourishing ourselves, of eating, and of making agriculture. Number 3, good health and well-being. Ensure healthy lives and promote well-being, so living in a good way, for all and at all ages. You will remember again in the COVID-19 that especially in the first months, so exactly 2 years ago, so in the spring of 2020, that there was a great problem related to the difficulties by the hospital in facing the pandemic. A lack of personnel in the hospitals, a lack of health workers, a lack of people that works in the health infrastructures. You will maybe remember there was these services in the TGs, in the TV newspapers, about long journey, long work hours for nurses and for doctors to face and to contrast the pandemic. So COVID-19 pandemic also showed us that health workers are in short supply in many regions, and this is was highly visible in many regions of the European Union. In Italy, but not only, and also in the other countries, in Belgium too, but also in Spain. I remember there was a great problem in Madrid during the spread of COVID-19 during the spring of 2020. So SDG number 3 is about improving and achieving a good health and a good health care for everybody and at all ages. Yeah, for youth and for the elderly, both the old and the young. Number 4, quality education. Ensure inclusive and equitable quality of education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Again, the example of COVID-19. COVID-19 has wiped out, has jeopardized 20 years of education gains, 20 years of great improvement of the quality of education system. Why United Nations says this? Because the so-called remote didactical activities, the acronym in Italian was DAD, D-A-D. I apologize, I don't know the acronym in French language, but the ways in which you went to school digitally, so from home, actually had negative consequences of the education system, because there are gaps there are differences, inequalities from households to households, from individual to individual, in the access to a good connections for making remote from the at home didactical and education activities. So according to these differences, the consequences of COVID-19 jeopardized a great and a positive and encouraging trend of reduction of education differences and disparities over the past 20 years. So quality education must be still a driver and a key goal within the sustainable development. Number 5, gender equality. Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. I suppose you studied, when you studied history, many differences between women and men in our past societies. Women began to vote and to be involved in the political initiatives and activities and political decisions for our countries after compared to men's. And today's woman still represents the only 25.6% of the representatives of the national parliaments. So reducing this gap and working for the gender equality, working for reducing gender inequality is an important aspect of sustainable development goals. Number 6, clean water and sanitation. Ensuring, what does it mean here? The ways in which we could ensure, so guaranteeing availability and a sustainable management of water systems and of sanitation for all. So guaranteeing drinkable water and guaranteeing water for hygiene purposes to everybody. Why? Because 29% of the entire world population still lack basic hygiene services, still have difficulties in the access to drinkable water and to decent sanitation systems. These aspects are everybody related, all related to the environment. Everything is actually related to the environment. Water is strictly related to the environment. Water characterizes the large majority, still characterize the large majority of Earth's surface. So once Earth is our environment, water is key aspect of our environment. Number 7, related to environment. SDG number 7, affordable and clean energy. Ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So we are talking about energy transition in this respect. Why? Because 759 million people in the entire world lack access to electricity. So it's an important number in this respect. SDG number 8, decent work and economic growth. So about the economy, about the GDP. Promote, what does it mean? Promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth for all and productive employment. This is also according to the consequences of the pandemic. SDG number 9, about industry, innovation, and infrastructure. We can maybe go a bit faster in this one. So about sustainability related to the industrial system. SDG number 10, reduce the inequalities. So we already talked about inequalities, and the number 10 is about the general inequalities within and among the different countries. We know that inequalities involve even migratory routes. People escape from some countries in search of better lives. In 2020, 4,186 deaths were recorded on the migratory routes worldwide. Reducing inequalities also entails reducing these migratory routes for ensuring safety and security and decent lives for many peoples everywhere. SDG number 11, sustainable cities and communities, making cities and human settlement inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Only half of the world urban populations today had convenient access to public transport, for instance. So, sustainable cities refers to the issue of sustainability related to the cities, especially. Number 12, responsible consumption and production, ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns. Think about e-waste, so the waste that we generate and we create about devices such as the smartphone, such as the laptop from which I am talking. Each person today generates about 7.3 kilograms of e-waste, but only 1.7 kilograms actually, according to this 7.3, was recycled in 2019. So we produce many wasted. We need actually more sustainable consumption with reference even to the production of waste. Therefore, so SDG number 12 is dedicated to this. 13, climate action. So take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. So the reduction of greenhouse gas emission and having carbon neutrality strategies. SDG number 14, life below water, even fishes matter. Conserve and sustainability use of the oceans, of the seas, and of marine resources within the sustainable development. So protect even the great biodiversity of marine areas. Many of them are not protected. Coralline barriers have been compromised and damaged over the past years due to human activity. SDG number 15, life on land. So life on seas, but also life on land. Protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystem, sustainability managed forest, and also to combat the desertification. Number 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. We already faced with trust in institutions over the past 3 days, and the SDG number 6 is dedicated to that. So, to the institution and to the importance of institution to promote peaceful and inclusive societies to achieve sustainable development. As a matter of example, child labor, for instance, which must be reduced, rose to 160 million in 2020, and was the first increase in 20 years after a great decrease. Last one, SDG 17, partners of the goal, making and revitalizing global partnership for the sustainable development, to achieve the sustainable development goals, and even to reduce the inequalities between rich countries and lower countries. Why? Look at this, 63% of low income and lower middle income countries are in need today of financing for data, for making better their statistics. Okay, let's spend together another half an hour and then we, more or less, and then we can go to the conclusion. These were the 17 SDG. Let's see how Europe and European Union works taking into account these 17 SDGs. Let's read together. Europe is committed, with reference to the action on the climate change, is committed to an ambitious decarbonization of its economy and to cutting dangerous emissions. This entails an adaptation, and we will have to continue adapting to growing climate and environmental pressures and changes. With reference to affordable energy and clean energy for everybody, I talked before about a change of perspective and of behavior. European Union already pursued this change of perspective and calls for it. Our industries, cities, and households will need to change the way they operate and they are powered. Our firms hold 30% of the world's patents for renewable energy technologies. And so, this is stated also in the white paper, all these sentences are reported in the white paper. Our major challenges will be to bring innovative solutions to market at home and even in the exchanges with other countries. So climate change for the European Union actions is a driver of the European Union, even to change, to transform these challenges related to climate change into opportunities. An example, working on the energy transition entails new job opportunities, new courses in the universities for the use of renewable sources, for making strategies towards the use of renewable energy more efficient. An example is the energy manager as a new job that has been created over the past years. So somebody that analyzes and improves the energy management of firms, industries, of public entities, public bodies, institutions, and also for the families, the households. Then European Union also faces with the Paris Agreement signed in 2015 in the COP21, UN Climate Conference 21 made in the 2015, which identified a threshold, 1.5 degrees. A key aim, the key aim is that of staying below 2 degrees of average global warming compared to pre-industrial era. But the COP21 decided to make this threshold a little bit lower, with the attempt of trying to make the increase of global warming to only 1.5 degrees. But what effectively European Union makes to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal and to meet the 1.5 threshold of the Paris Agreement of 2015? The Green Deal. European Union developed the EU Green Deal, which is a set of initiatives with the general aim of making the European Union the world's first climate neutral area within 2050. To understand better what EU Green Deal is, let's see together a 1-minute video, because I can imagine that listen only to me could be boring. So 1 minute 45 of a simple video made by the European Commission.
I want Europe to become the first climate neutral continent in the world by 2050.
European Green Deal could be a cornerstone for changing our politics, changing how economies, changing. If we want to deliver policies, we mobilize EU funds. Yes. That's exactly what we want. Most importantly is the works which are going to be done.
Appropriate support for pay and obligations. We need everyone, and no one will get left behind.
As we continue to battle the pandemic, we must also focus on our long-term challenges. This is why the Green Deal, as a growth strategy, remains our compass throughout the recovery.
We will reduce emissions by at least 55% by 2030. And today's agreement puts us on a clear path towards climate neutrality in 2050. It gives certainty to investors, to businesses, to public authorities, and to citizens. It future-proofs our union.
Okay. Let's go back to us. We'll be a little bit faster because I've noticed that time is running out. So, according to this video, EU Green Deal have 3 pillars. No net emission of greenhouse gases within 2050, making a sustainable economic growth decoupled from resource use, and no place and no person to be left behind. And also, according with in mind the consequences of the pandemic, a EU Green Deal could be put into action even within the actions that European Union developed for the post-pandemic recovery, which is the EU Next Generation EU Recovery Plan, adopted by each member state with the resiliency and recovery plans, PNRR. What to do concretely? A set of proposals, therefore, that makes EU's climate, energy, transport system and taxation policies able to reducing net greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% within 2030, so the threshold of 2030 again, compared to the levels of 1990. So in a difference between 1990 and 2030. Minus 55% of greenhouse gas emission. This is the forecast. But the climate and energy targets for European Union can be also compared on a closer and shorter scale. Between 2020 and 2030, the achieve about the reduction of greenhouse gas emission was minus to reduce of 20% when was defined these targets. And now, between 2020 and 2030, the aim is to reduce of 40% the emission of greenhouse gases. Then, the use of renewable resources to be increased from 20% resources, energy and consumption, increases from 20 to 32%, and also about the efficiency of energy systems from 20 to 32.5%. Again, the global greenhouse emissions are strictly affected and characterized by human activity. You can notice about this pie chart. I suppose that your teachers illustrated what a pie chart is to you, right? You can notice that the large majority of this pie chart is covered by energy. That's why we will talk about energy community in the next step, okay? 73.2% of the global greenhouse gas emissions is generated by the energy sector, and this energy sector is subdivided into different human activities: energy used in industry, in the transport system, and in the buildings. Therefore, these pie charts again remind us that human activities strongly affect the environment because it affects the emission of global greenhouse gas. Okay. Another document that was developed in the field of energy by the European Union within the Green Deal, but promulgated actually a year before, in 2019, is the Clean Energy for All European package, which is an energy rule book, so a book that defines the rules to deliver on two main commitments, two main objectives of the Paris Agreement: reducing the global greenhouse emissions and advancing the process of decarbonization of Europe, so of using more and more sources of renewable energy. This is so the differences, right, that we already talked about. By the 2030, increasing the percentage of electricity that comes from renewables, and by the 2050, making the European Union a continent that is completely carbon-free. There are 5 dimensions of the energy union related to this package: energy security, internal European market of energy, energy efficiency, so making more sustainable the energy system, decarbonization, and developing research and innovation and forms and competitive activities within the field of energy transition. Key topic of energy transition is that of renewable energy. And again, let's make a video talking about this. Only 52 seconds from the European Commission. Okay, that's back to us for the last effort in this journey through the study of environment. This video talked about renewable energy, right? But how we could improve the production and the consumption of renewable energy with something that is called community energy projects. So pay attention to the latest chapter of this journey. So last, I think, 15 minutes to figure out and discover what do we mean by community energy, which is an item through which we could achieve the targets of the EU Green Deal. They are collective initiatives and collective organizations in general terms. Collective energy actions, to say it better, that foster, that encourage citizens' participation across the energy systems. What I told to you before, that this, for me, I grew up having an idea of a passive behavior related to the switching on and switching off a light. Now, citizen participation is rather adopted as a key issue in the generation and production and consumption of energy from renewable sources, with the aim also of encouraging, of paving the way for a clean energy transition. So making more important the role of citizens, and not only of the expert of developing energy systems, but also on the citizens, of the consumers within the energy systems made by the production of renewable energy. We see together the last illustrative video of our today's morning.
Power's a funny thing. We talk about being powered by things, by electricity grids, by renewable energy, by all sorts of clever technology. But what powers the power? Simple answer. You do. This is community energy. Community energy is a movement that plugs people into the heart of the energy system. Community energy organisations harness the power of natural resources to provide the local community with green, clean, sustainable energy. It brings communities together so they can understand, own, use, and save energy. Because what matters to people isn't just the power that's delivered to their community, but how it's delivered. Whether it is solar panels on buildings or in fields, wind turbines, electric vehicle charging, energy efficiency, energy advice, and more. There are over 400 organisations across the country empowering local communities. Getting communities directly involved ensures everyone manages the change. Investors who help make it happen get paid a return on that, and no one gets left out. The whole point of community energy organisations is to get them to a stage where they generate their own profits to benefit local people. We use profits to support community initiatives like food banks and energy improvements for the vulnerable, tackling inequality and improving the quality of people's lives. Many deliver other green initiatives for energy efficiency and protecting the natural environment, helping to tackle the climate crisis and build thriving communities. Every project is a step to a fairer, more sustainable, net zero future for all. So what is community energy? People, powering projects, powering people. To find out more, visit powertochange.org.uk.
Okay. So, hope was clear and fun enough for you. And so, this video and shaded light explained the relevance of renewable energy within the EU Green Deal, within the achievement of Sustainable Development Goals number 7 of clean and affordable energy and number 13 of climate action plan, and also within the clean energy for all European package. So the differences of the energy that can be generated from wind turbines, from photovoltaic, or rather solar panels, and from turbines that generate hydropower electricity, differs from the non-renewable resources because they fall entirely under natural sources, whereas non-renewable energy sources run out upon a consumption of additional resources, which is therefore less sustainable compared to renewable energy. The renewable energy communities works for the development of the energy co-production and consumption from renewable sources involving the citizens with different forms, collaborations, organizations, crowdfunding for buying a sort of solar panels, and so on and so on. But what is the percentage of the renewable energy in the energy consumption across the European Union countries? You can notice that northern countries are doing a little bit better than countries of the southern Europe, let's say. And in this respect, Belgium is doing a little bit better than Italy. But we could even provide an example of a recently developed renewable energy community in the Italian context. This has been launched in 2021, so the past year. The Comunità Energetica e Solidale, Solidaristic Energy Community of Naples Est. So we are in the eastern periphery of Naples. And we are I will be very quickly for another example. This is a collective project that was developed in a neighborhood, in an area of the city of Naples that is characterized by a large presence of poor people and of non-efficient buildings with reference to the energy efficiency and the energy systems. Oh, this has been blocked. Okay. This is the solar panel. The photos have been taken by me in the pictures. This is the solar panel that this collective initiatives brings on the roofs of a specific building, which is the building of Fondazione Famiglia di Maria, a foundation that installed these solar panels with the help of Legambiente and of other organization that works for combat poverty in the city of Naples. They installed this photovoltaic panel to give and provide renewable energy, so green energy, to poor families in this area. So families that were involved to participate to this project. You can notice like they are not modern buildings, right? They are quite ruined buildings. They were old public housings, let's say, public housing that never had energy efficiency restorations. So this is a very important example because it was developed through the collective actions of many different citizens. So different that a key role was played by, this is the other part of this, the area where these photovoltaic panels are located. But I was saying a key role was played by this young guy, this 11 years old guy, the little Gennaro, that received from the President of the Italian Republic, Sergio Mattarella, the award of Bishop of the Italian Republic, because he was awarded as the youngest child that involved adults in an energy transition project, in being involved in this energy transition, in a community energy, in this project of energy transition, also educating these old adults in the importance of energy transition. This is to say that the development of renewable energy communities and the attention that is dedicated to renewable energy and to the environmental changes is combined with a youth power, with a grid awareness by the younger generations. You know her, right? This is very important for in general terms about the need of making communities for the future of our environment. You guys are the first generation that share a common worry, a common concern about the future of our planet, making protest and making collective organization about that. Fridays for Future is a great example of this youth power. When I was in your shoes, when I was in your position, when I had your age, manifestations were present, were existence they were dedicated to precariousness, to the unemployment, to the difficulty to access labor market, but they were usually also influenced by political behavior on those problems, okay? To the contrary, differently from those, manifestations such as Friday for Futures empower youths, empower the younger generation with a collective and non, let's say, political influenced concern. Politicians are obliged, let's say, to look at the future's environment without any political behavior or political position. Is a collective and common and shared aspect for everybody, where the youth have the power to inform and to have an agreed awareness about this. I noticed, for instance, from my Instagram feed, a guy, 18 years old guys from here, from Trieste, began to follow me. And so I see basically his activities that every day does to inform, to educate other guys of the same age about the importance of taking climate actions and of using renewable energy sources. So this is very visible, in my opinion, about the youth power, about the importance of making community. Not only youth, but also politicians. We talked about the collective initiatives that are needed to achieve SDGs and to take climate actions. And an example is the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the body by the UN organized for studying the climate change. So for achieving this need, this importance of staying below 1.5 degrees of growth of global warming temperature. So youth power on one hand, with Friday for Future and with the great involvement and the great importance of their contemporariness, their education about their contemporary needs, and the aspect that the young generation are seeing and experiencing day by day these concerns with the environment, but also collective initiatives by the European Union and largely by the United Nations. Conclusion. We ended to the conclusion. We started at 9 more or less, so I apologize for these 5 to 10 minutes of exceeding. We saw that there are 5 priority routes within the related to the future of Europe defined by the White Paper on Europe. Today we talked about environment, and we know that the road about environment, to summarize what we talked about today, is defined by a combination of social changes and climate changes. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals in their heterogeneity and diversity. All of them, some in a very concrete and closer way, some other more on a distance, are related to our environment. The energy transition towards renewable energy systems and the co-production, the production and the consumption of renewable energy, and the renewable energy communities as a specific tools to achieve the energy transition, and different forms of community engagements, both of non-political initiatives such as Fridays for Futures, or political initiatives such as the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Before to say goodbye, I will stop talking by leaving a game to you, a game that enables to calculate and estimate your carbon footprint. But what is a carbon footprint? So one more keyword before to say goodbye is the total amount of greenhouse gases. We learned today what greenhouse gases are and what greenhouse gases emissions are. So the total amount of greenhouse gases, including CO2 and methane, that are generated by our individual action. So thanks to this game that has been designed and developed by the Global Footprint Network, you can access via this link. This slide will be delivered to you so we could make your own use. And by clicking on this link, you can calculate your carbon footprint. So share this game with your friends, your parents, brothers and sisters, cousins, other relatives, or even if teachers agrees, even in classes. And if teachers like, they can also calculate their carbon footprint. So stay power, make sustainable environment a reality. And thanks to everybody for your kind attention and for your patience.
Mr. Davidovich, thank you very much. See you in the future. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Goodbye.